Hello, Year 8, and welcome to session 2, where I'm going to talk through the installments and the questions, and you can have a look at your ideas and compare them to my ideas and what other people have thought about the story. So we're going to start with installment 1. Now, what part of the world is the story set in? So predicting, inferring from the text. So we know that it's somewhere that has dusty streets, muddy streets. And then we have a city and we have rice paddies. So which part of the world do rice paddies exist in? Paddy fields. And the name Ojukwu. So which cultures, which parts of the world eat rice, a lot of rice? So guesses like predicting, trying to infer from that. We could be thinking sort of Indian cultures and countries like India, Sri Lanka, China, those countries. Now, what is happening? So we have some weather described, so clouds charging up a horizon and rain, and the drops changing into streams. So we've got some weather, rain falling, and we've got some activity. So a stream of old men and women trudging up over a ridge to the paddy fields, and children laughing. So they are farmers and they are harvesting the crops, so the rice from the rice fields, the paddy fields. So who is taking part? So old men and women, so we can see that here, and children and children's mothers. So there's a generation of men missing, so that would be the fathers of the children. So what could be the reason for the fathers not taking part in the planting? And think about what's taken them away for 5 or 6 years. So men in a society being away from their families, being away from normal everyday life like farming. Some of you thought that the men could be dead, being forced away, and some of you thought that it could be war, and those ideas do tie together, don't they? So what could last 5 or 6 years? So a war going on for 5 or 6 years. So historically, you can use your knowledge. What do you know about big wars that lasted around that time? So those of you that thought that, very well done. So let's have a look at installment 2. We have got questions here about the earthquake and what else is being described. So we were right for our inference. The war took all the young men away. And then this last section where it's describing the city. He looks at the town spread, how big the town was now, shining with glass and concrete, its streets paved with noisy traffic. It had not always been like this. Ojokwu remembered when it had been a town built of lath and paper, more than once in fact, for the earthquake had flattened it and it had been rebuilt many times. But there had been no serious tremors for years. So, culturally, again, if you're in a geographic location where you're prone to natural disasters and things, being made towns being made of paper and thin bits of wood be very much easier to rebuild. So you can think of cultures that use paper and wood to build their houses, build their homes, build the buildings that make up the cities. So obviously now there is glass and concrete. So that gives us a clue about time period. So Jokwa is obviously an old man, and he remembers the time where the town was made of much more old-fashioned material. But now look, the streets are paved and there's noisy traffic. So we're assuming cars. So why does the writer mention earthquakes in the past? So there hasn't been a tremor for years. And we know what the title of this story is, don't we? The Last Days. So is the writer giving us a clue now, early on, that there may be an earthquake that happened in the past, and it may happen again. Now, is it allaying our fears or building tension? So there hadn't been no serious tremors for years. So does that make us think, oh, there won't be one happening now? Or does that make us think, oh, well, there is going to be one happening? So it's building tension and intrigue for the reader, isn't it? So what else does the writer make us think and feel? The ideas up here in this first section about war taking people away. That's what I think about first. So what war does to a society, taking young men away. And it was those young men who'd marched singing to pick the shoots, the farming. So they singing, suggesting that they're very happy and contented and eager to plant and farm and pick, loving life and loving the society that they have, because the old had stayed behind preparing the feast and the carnival celebration, which would last for 4 days once the rice crop was safely planted. So what else does the writer make us think and feel? Well, I think about the waste of war and violence and what that does to community and society. Because if there's no one left to prepare the feast for the carnival, like the old people used to do it, there won't be a feast and a carnival anymore, will there? So that's one thing that I've been thinking about in this extract. Also, Ojokwo being old and having to rest his aching limbs makes us feel sad for him. And here, when he's reminiscing about how things have changed There's sort of a nostalgia, a sort of a sadness about being old and looking back. About things being different. How time goes on, we can't control it, things just happen. There's lots of things in there that I was thinking about, so well done if you were thinking about those, any of those as well. And on to installment 3. So we have ideas about the volcano. So earthquakes and volcanoes go together, don't they? So we've got a mountain standing white over blue foothills had not erupted for years. So in the previous instalment we had earthquakes not knocking down any buildings in the town for a long while without no tremors. And now it's mentioned the volcano. So thinking back to the title, The Last Days of Ojokwu, we're thinking what could happen to him. How, we've had the rain, and with the possibility of tremors and earthquakes, and now we've got the idea of an earthquake, uh, not just an earthquake, a volcano erupting near the city. So those of you predicting and inferring will be thinking about how Ojokwu may be meeting his demise, the end of his days. So what do you think at the moment when we don't know what's happening towards the end of the story? How do you think he will die? So, as well as the volcano, what else does the writer make us think about? So, here we have the young and the old working together, wading knee deep in the brown mud, working all day. So that makes us think about, the vulnerable and the old doing all the work. Again, going back to the idea of war and what a waste that is for a society, making everyone have to work harder. Up here, we've got a plume of smoke, chimneys and factories. So that makes me think about pollution. So we have this idea of a beautiful sacred mountain, but then idea of pollution sort of spoils that image, doesn't it? And then we've got the weather again, rained without stopping, and how he was glad he hadn't had to walk back to the town in the rain. And again, look how hard they're working. So they're still working in the fields the next morning. So more things to think about there. And then the last section, and who knows, he might have lived. So this is a nice bit of writing, isn't it? Making us understand the chance Ojokwu takes with his life, but not knowing about it. So it was a pity that the sun came out, for otherwise Ojokwu might not have resisted his friend's invitation to stay another night. And who knows, he might have lived. So that irony, that sadness, that sad idea that the sunshine coming out is what caused Ojokwu not to stay another night. And because of that, he died. So if it had stayed raining, if the weather had stayed bad and miserable and not turned nice, he would still be alive. Isn't that ironic? So irony is an important term, so you might want to look that up if you're not sure how that is ironic. And who knows, he might have lived. So how does the last two sentences make us feel? So again, that sadness, lots of you talked about for Ojokwu. Now, so if he's not safe staying with his friend away from the city, and he doesn't stay another night, we know he goes back to the town, to the city. So that is where he dies, or on the way back to the city. So are you thinking of any other ways he may die? What do you think? Now, an idea here about symbolism. What have you picked out? So we talked before about the smoke and the mountain, the symbolism of the city producing smoke and the mountain producing smoke, mirroring each other, enhancing the effects of both. The danger maybe, the idea of pollution, like nature producing smoke, but us also producing smoke. And here we have a nice bit of symbolism. Tender shoots deep and safe under the brown water in the paddies. So if we think about the metaphor, the tender shoots deep and safe under brown water. So the tender shoots, what are they? The young, they could represent the young people being kept safe by their parents, protected by the city, so the brown water. You know, symbolism, like metaphor, where things symbolize, represent something else. So there's lots in those extracts. So we've looked at installment 1, 2, and 3. This is our second session. So you can add to your notes if you would like to, or see if you agree with what I've been saying and write some comments back if you would like to. And then in our third session, I will read the final 4 installments and give you the questions for those. Okay, so I hope you're liking the story so far. Thank you for your comments on Show My Homework so far. I like looking at them. So tune in for session 3 tomorrow. Bye bye.